and welcome to Sipz and Stories. My name is Elizabeth, and in today's video I will be doing my very first book vlog for this channel. So last weekend I decided to visit all of my favorite bookstores in and around Seattle and the Puget Sound. I have lived in this area for about 8 years now, and there's something really special about Washington bookstores. It seems like a lot of people here like to read. I personally blame the weather since we're all cooped up inside so much during the rainy season, but there are a number of really quality bookstores in this area. And I find that kind of ironic because, as you know, we're also known for being home to the largest online retailer of books. I will not mention names, but it's nice to know that we still support so many wonderful independent bookstores, and I cannot wait to share them with you all today. So grab your favorite beverage as we discuss these amazing bookstores. The first place I wanted to discuss today is not technically in Seattle. It's actually a short ferry ride from downtown Seattle, and that is Eagle Harbor Books on Bainbridge Island. I love taking the Washington State ferries. In fact, even as a local, it's always a fun time to take the ferry. It's the perfect day trip, the perfect way to clear your head and get out there. And it's really fun if you're new to the area because you can get some amazing views of the Seattle skyline, of Mount Rainier. The day I went was a typical Seattle overcast day, so we didn't get any shots of Mount Rainier, but still, I haven't been on the ferry for quite some time, so it was delightful to take the trip again to Bainbridge Island. Bainbridge Island is about 20 minutes away, and the ferry is very inexpensive for walk-on passengers. It's about $10 for adults and about $5 for kids. So an easy, cheap way to have some fun in Seattle. Once you arrive on Bainbridge Island, there is plenty to do. There are a number of towns to visit. There are wineries, places to go biking or rent a kayak, or even go horseback riding if you really want to. For me, I personally never venture much farther than the first town of Winslow, which is about a 5-10 minute walk from the ferry terminal, and there is plenty to do there to keep you occupied for a few hours or all day. Of course, I usually head to Winslow for one reason, and that is to visit one of my favorite bookstores, Eagle Harbor Books. It's about a block down the street, right across from my favorite bakery, Blackbird Bakery, to grab a coffee, and my favorite ice cream, Moira ice cream, of course. So there's a number of shops to visit, a number of places to have lunch or breakfast, but Eagle Harbor Books is the main attraction for me, and I absolutely love this bookstore. It is the perfect bookstore that really represents the Pacific Northwest. It's very woodsy, it's very iconic, a lot of hardwood floors, very beautiful and cozy, and it's always just a nice place to mix, mingle, and be on Bainbridge Island. They have a really nice selection too. So towards the front, you'll have some of your newer books, a lot of books about nature in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of biography. And then as you work your way towards the middle of the store, that's where they house most of the fiction and nonfiction. And at the very back of the store is where they have their children's and YA department. They also have a number of really nice cards and journals and gifts. I mean, who does not love all of the fun gifts at a bookstore? And when I was there, they couldn't have been any nicer to me. They were really nice because I was looking for book darts, and so everyone in the whole store went around trying to find book darts for me, which they did, and I thank them, by the way. So let's see what we got at Eagle Harbor Books. So I was walking around the store for a little bit. I wasn't sure what I wanted until I saw this really beautiful book. It is called A Whale of the Wild by Rosanne Parry. She is most famous for A Wolf Called Wander as well. She is a conservationist, a naturalist, and she writes all of these children's books about preserving natural wildlife. So it can't get any better than the orca whales, which are really the icon of Seattle. And sometimes if you're on the ferry, you can spot them, usually around this time of year, September, October. So I thought this was a great book to start off this vlog with, and it's absolutely stunning. It is a signed edition by Rosanne Parry, which is always nice. And it has just gorgeous, gorgeous illustrations throughout. A really nice one for maybe about 3rd grade, 4th grade. And there are illustrations on literally every page. So a perfect one to read with kids. I think this would be a good buddy read. Oh, there's the wolf. This would be a good one to read aloud in the classroom. And it is told from the perspective of the whale herself, Vega, who gets separated from her pod. So I cannot wait to read this one with kids. I know dozens and dozens of kids that would probably love this book. So happy I found it at my first stop of Eagle Harbor Books. Once I was done in Bainbridge, I got back on the ferry, and it drops you off right in downtown Seattle. And when you're down there, you do not want to miss the iconic Seattle Public Library. It's a beautiful building. It's very known for book lovers and architecture lovers alike. One of the most beautiful libraries in the entire world. So you cannot miss the Seattle Public Library. Then you can continue up the hill to Capitol Hill to visit this next iconic bookstore. This one is probably the most iconic bookstore in Seattle. It's the place you would most likely find Michelle Obama, and that is Elliott Bay Book Company. This is a wonderful bookstore, and no trip to Seattle is complete unless you have visited Elliott Bay Books. They started out in the 1970s, so they've been around for about 40 years now, and their original location was in Pioneer Square downtown, and since 2010 they have been in this location in Capitol Hill, and it is absolutely stunning. I really think this bookstore is one of the most beautiful bookstores I've ever visited. It's just so light and airy. It's in an old building, an old warehouse, and so it just has beautiful wood floors, exposed wood beam ceilings, and then of course exposed brick walls. So stunning. And Capitol Hill is a very urban, hip neighborhood, so it's the perfect place to mix, mingle, and be and see all the young college students and cool people in Seattle. So when you're there, there are a number of coffee shops to visit, breweries, restaurants. It's really an exciting part of Seattle. In fact, if you want to try the best cup of coffee in Seattle, and everyone is always asking me, where is the best coffee in Seattle? It's in Capitol Hill at Vivanche Coffee and Roasters. This place has been around since the 80s, and in fact, Howard Schultz and the owner of Vivanche started at the same time. So while Starbucks grew into this giant company, Vivanche still stayed local, but they are known for training a number of other coffee roasters like Intelligentsia and Stumptown and Blue Bottle. They're known for the coffee art and the correct pour and the correct shot. So if you are a coffee nerd, this is the perfect place to go. And I admit, I really do think this is the best cup of coffee in Seattle, a great place to visit in Capitol Hill. One word of warning I should say about Capitol Hill is that it's a very urban neighborhood. It's suited more to college-age students and adults than it is to children. In fact, you may have seen it on the news last year when it was the autonomous zone and a lot of rioting was happening up there. I haven't been up there in about a year, and I have noticed that it's gotten progressively worse, a little dirtier, a lot of boarded up shops and windows. But it's still a safe neighborhood to visit if you're visiting Seattle. I just don't recommend it for children. So I will put that out there. So what did I end up getting at Elliott Bay? So I find when I go to these iconic bookstores like Elliott Bay or Powell's or The Strand, that it's a little hard to browse with all of the tourists. So sometimes I just get down on myself because I don't find that like special book. And when that happens, I usually just go for a book that I've been meaning to read anyways. And so for me, the one that I got was Tokyo Ever After. Yes, a really popular book, and I had it on hold at the library for a while now, but there was a huge stack at Elliott Bay, and I thought, okay, that's a sign that I should buy this book, and happy to support local. It is by Emiko Jean, and I think it is a lot like The Princess Diaries, except the princess is from Japan, or the prince is from Japan. I loved The Princess Diaries when I was a teenager, so I knew that I really had to read this book, and I'm happy that I bought this edition at Elliott Bay. The next bookstore that I would like to talk about is one of my all-time favorite bookstores in the Seattle area, and that is Third Place Books. And fortunately, Third Place has over 3 locations, so there's a lot to choose from. One is in South Seattle, and then one is in North Seattle near the University of Washington. And the one that I visited on this trip is actually in a town a little north of Seattle called Lake Forest Park. Lake Forest Park is more of a suburban area. It's really pretty. It has a lot of trees, very woodsy. It is on the top of Lake Washington, so it's very centrally located if you want to go west into Linwood or Edmonds, or if you want to go east into Redmond or Kirkland. So it's very centrally located. This bookstore I chose because it's the biggest Third Place Books location, and it is the flagship location in Lake Forest Park. It is about the size of your average Barnes & Noble, so it is huge for an independent bookstore, and it has just hundreds and thousands of books. The fiction section alone is worth the trip. They also have a lot of new and used books, so they will purchase books from you directly from the consumer if you make an appointment with them. Also, as a book collector, they have a really nice rare book section of used books and collectible books. So for all you folio fans, there are a number of folios there, a lot of Easton Press books, a lot of Franklin Library books, and just really rare editions of books. So I always like browsing that section when I'm at Third Place Books. They also have a nice YA and children's section at Third Place Books, which is at the back of the store. It's a cute area to browse. And that is where I bought the majority of the books at Third Place Books on this visit. So let's see what I bought, shall we? The first book that I bought was Kiki's Delivery Service by Eiko Kadono. And I have never seen the movie or read the book. I think the movie came first, but I thought this would be a cute one to read during Halloween. So that's why I picked up this one. I also bought a book I have read previously, but not since high school, and that is Habibi by Naomi Shihab Nye. Sorry for the mispronunciation. This is a really great book if you want to teach kids about the politics of the Middle East, and unfortunately now is a good time to do that. This book is about a young girl named Habibi. She moves from America back to her family's home in Palestine, and she learns all about the Arab traditions of her family. I love when they're all drinking the Turkish coffee. And while she's there, she befriends a young Jewish boy named Omar, and so obviously that creates some trouble because he's Jewish and she's Arab. So a really fantastic book if you want to teach kids about the Middle East. Really love this one and can't wait to reread it. And the last book that I got at Third Place was More Than This by Patrick Ness. This is a book I have been meaning to read for a while now, and I've been reading a lot of YA this year, so I thought I'd pick it up soon. And not only do I love that cover, it's such a really interesting graphic design, but it is about a boy named Seth who drowns and dies, and he goes to this other place. And we don't know what it is, whether it's heaven or hell or purgatory. It sounds a little like the Twilight Zone to me, and it does sound really interesting, so I'm looking forward to reading this. I've heard a lot of great reviews on this one. The next bookstore that I wanted to talk about during this video is actually not an independent bookstore. It's a chain. It's called Half Price Books. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. And Seattle happens to have a lot of locations. So all the way from Tacoma to the south to Everett up north. I think there's about 7 locations in the Puget Sound region. And I really like supporting Half Price Books because they buy a lot of their stock directly from the community. And since Seattle is so well read, there are a lot of really interesting used books at Half Price Books, and I always walk out with a bag full of books. I do like their business model because they are still owned and operated by the same family. They're based in, I believe, Dallas, Texas, and they have about 100 locations throughout the country. And the one that I really like visiting the most in Seattle is actually on the east side in Redmond, Washington. So Redmond is on the east side of Lake Washington. It's a little north of Bellevue, and it's right next to Kirkland. So Kirkland and Redmond are right next to each other. In fact, if you want to go down and grab a coffee and sit by Lake Washington, Kirkland is only like about a 5-minute drive away. But Redmond has the shopping center, and it's a really nice outside shopping center to walk around with the family, with the kids, and it is noticeably safer than Capitol Hill. So if you want to go book shopping, I do recommend Redmond as a safer neighborhood, and in fact, it is more of a wealthier neighborhood. Redmond is also home to Microsoft, in case you were wondering, and it is just a really pretty woodsy area. I really enjoy this shopping center because it's all outside, so there's a number of restaurants and coffee shops, and my favorite ice cream, Molly Moon's ice cream, is literally right across the street from this half-price bookstore. So every time that I load up on books, I head over to Molly Moon's next for ice cream. And Half Price Books just has a huge selection. As I said, they buy a lot of wholesale books directly from the publisher, and then they buy a lot of books from the community as well. There are also a number of rare used books in certain parts of the store, and I find their staff is always very friendly and very helpful. So let's see what I bought on this trip to Half Price Books. Some books that I was so excited to see right when I walked through the door were these Flame Tree Press editions of some science fiction horror classics. They did have Dracula and Frankenstein, but I already own copies of Dracula and Frankenstein, and I don't like to buy multiples. So I bought a couple in these editions that I don't own. For me, that would be The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. I thought this would be a fun one to read during Halloween. And then I also bought War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Who does not love that cover? It's so psychedelic and really cool. It has foiling on the cover, and then the edges are almost this coppery color, pinkish color. So cool. I love these editions. And as you can see, I didn't even take the sticker off because I'm proud that they were only $7 a piece. The next set of books that I bought at Half Price Books was this collection by Louisa May Alcott. It features, of course, Little Women, Little Men, and Jo's Boys. And I was so excited when I saw this collection because not only do I plan to do future videos about Louisa May Alcott, but I have never owned a really nice collection of her books. I have, of course, a few editions of Little Women. I think I have a really old battered copy of Little Men, and I don't think I own a copy at all of Jo's Boys. So to find this used edition by, let's see, Little Brown Books, I was so excited. They just are really nice, really pretty, soft, delicate pastels, and I like these editions a little more than the ones that are currently in print, which are very kind of cartoonish. So I was so excited when I found this for only $10. What a steal. The next book that I found was really interesting. I've never seen a physical copy of this book, and that is The Professor by Charlotte Bronte. I read Villette last year and I loved it, and The Professor, I know, is her very first novel. It's the most autobiographical about her time in Belgium when she had this unrequited romance for one of her professors. It's very short. It looks like it's only about 200 pages, this Arcturus edition, and I'm so happy to own a physical copy of this because it would be a really nice one to compare and contrast with Villette and Jane Eyre, especially during Victober, which is coming up. Also, Half Price Books does have a huge selection of these inexpensive Arcturus editions, and it's really a nice way to start a classics collection very inexpensively. And they had a lot of titles like The Professor that were very unusual and very different than what you would expect. So I love Half Price Books. Alrighty, I saved the best for last, of course. This last bookstore I'm going to talk about is my favorite bookstore in Washington. In fact, it's one of my favorite bookstores in America. I love this bookstore. It's just the perfect place in my opinion. And that is Village Books, which is in Bellingham, Washington. Bellingham is about an hour north of Seattle. It's pretty easy to get to. It's a great day trip. It's on the border of Washington and Canada. So next stop is Vancouver if you are on your way to Vancouver. So it's about an hour south of Vancouver and an hour north of Seattle. Village Books is actually located a little south of Bellingham itself in the small seaside town of Fairhaven. And it is so nautical and coastal. It's the perfect place to grab a coffee and walk around, perfect for families and kids. And you can go down to the water and just sit there all day. I absolutely love Fairhaven. There's a number of really excellent restaurants there for all you seafood lovers. And I did have a few oysters while I was there on this trip. But the real star attraction of Fairhaven is Village Books. Village Books is one of my all-time favorite bookstores, not only in Washington, but across America. I love bookstores like Powell's and the Strand and Elliott Bay. But at the end of the day, I love a bookstore that really represents the community, and that is perfectly represented at Village Books. It almost feels like you're in a Hallmark movie when you're there. Just a lot of kids walking around, families, a lot of older adults too. So it's perfect for the entire family. There's a real sense of community at Village Books. In fact, they boast that they host every year over 300 community events, everything from author signings to writing workshops to even some concerts by local artists. A number of really high-profile authors have visited Village Books, and I'm sure they know about Village Books. It's pretty iconic in the book world in terms of independent bookstores. And it's wonderful because it's in this brick building right on the corner of downtown. It's 3 stories, so it has a huge selection. On the main floor, when you walk in, there are all of the newer books, some of the staff picks, book club selections. Then it winds its way into some of the nonfiction, history, politics, that type of thing. And then towards the back of the first floor is the children's and YA department. On the second floor is where all of the fiction is housed, and there's also a nice coffee shop up there, and I think you can get a light lunch up there as well. And you can also sit there and overlook the Puget Sound. It's absolutely beautiful. And there are a number of staff picks, and I just love all those little cards that they put next to their favorite books. It's also where the mystery genre is housed. And then more towards like the basement or like the third bottom level is where there's a lot of used books. They have a lot of travel books, puzzles, calendars, that type of thing. And then right next door to Village Books, I didn't really visit it, but it's called Paper Dreams. It's a really nice stationery store and gift store. So really wonderful place to be if you're visiting with family. And with a view like that, you just cannot miss Village Books, one of my favorite bookstores in all of Washington. So you might be wondering, what did I get at Village Books? The book that I got on this trip was one I was so excited when I saw, and that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. As I've said before on this channel, I am working my way through the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Last year, I bought a beautiful Lord of the Rings set with illustrations by Alan Lee, and so I thought it was in time that I had a really nice edition of The Hobbit as well. And what better place to find this than at Village Books, one of my favorite bookstores. It is so pretty in person. It is a naked hardback with gold leaf, and it is illustrated by Jemima Catlin, I believe is how you pronounce her name. And then throughout the book are just these really adorable illustrations. Let's see if I can find my favorite one. Yes, here is of the dwarves and the hobbits and the team of dwarves on their way to fight the dragon. I think there is a really nice one of the dragon as well, if I can find it. It's a really good one of the dragon. I never know how to pronounce his name, Schmeg. So yeah, I'm so happy to have this, and once I finish Lord of the Rings, I probably will do a reread of The Hobbit, which I haven't read in years. So happy I found this book at one of my favorite bookstores, Village Books. Thank you everyone for joining me for my Seattle bookstore tour. I had a great time last weekend visiting all of my favorite bookstores in Washington. These are what I consider the can't miss bookstores in the area. And of course, there are dozens and dozens of excellent independent bookstores that I didn't get a chance to visit, but they are peppered throughout Seattle, and each one is better than the next. Thank you for joining me, everyone, and have a great day.